fancy term for getting out of parking tickets. He never imagined it would save him from an intergalactic execution squad, but here he was, standing in the pristine corridors of the Zephyrian royal palace, wondering how a simple trade negotiation had turned into the worst day of his life. The Zephyrians were beautiful in the way that made humans uncomfortable. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with crystalline skin that shifted between blue and silver depending on the light. Their eyes were large and luminous, containing what appeared to be swirling galaxies. Most unsettling of all were their movements, fluid and precise, as if they were dancing through life while everyone else stumbled along. Marcus straightened his tie and tried not to think about the fact that his hands were still shaking from the morning's events. 24 hours ago, he had been Earth's youngest trade ambassador, proud of his appointment to negotiate mining rights for rare minerals that could revolutionize human technology. Now he was standing trial for allegedly insulting the crown princess of the Zephyrian Empire. The throne room was a marvel of alien architecture. Walls curved impossibly upward, seeming to defy gravity as they twisted into a spiral that disappeared into darkness above. Crystals embedded in the walls pulsed with soft light, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. The air itself seemed to shimmer, filled with microscopic particles that reflected light in ways that made Marcus dizzy. Ambassador Chun, the voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. You stand accused of the gravest insult possible to our royal bloodline. How do you plead? Marcus looked around the room, trying to locate the source of the voice. Finally, he spotted them on a raised platform that seemed to float in midair. The royal family of Zephyria sat on thrones that appeared to be carved from single massive diamonds, their crystalline skin reflecting the light in dazzling displays. In the center sat Emperor Veilthon, his presence commanding even from a distance. His skin was deeper blue than the others, with silver veins running through it like lightning frozen in crystal. To his right sat the Empress, whose beauty was so alien and perfect that Marcus had to look away after a moment. And there, to the Emperor's left, sat Princess Lyralii. Marcus had met her the previous day during what he thought was a routine diplomatic dinner. She was younger than her parents, her crystalline skin more silver than blue, with those characteristic swirling galaxy eyes that seemed to see right through him. During their conversation about trade agreements, he had made what he thought was a harmless joke about how humans and Zephyrians probably had very different ideas about family planning. Apparently, he had been catastrophically wrong. Your Majesties, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly in the vast space. I must respectfully state that I meant no offense. In human culture, discussions of family structure are common topics of conversation. I was unaware that suggesting Princess Lyralii might one day choose her own marriage partner would be considered insulting. A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through the assembled court, though with Zephyrians it was hard to tell. Their emotional expressions were subtle, communicated more through changes in the light patterns of their skin than through facial expressions. Choose her own partner. Emperor Veilthon's voice carried a note of what Marcus hoped was amusement rather than further anger. Ambassador, you clearly misunderstand our customs. Royal marriages are not matters of choice. They are sacred bonds that unite empires, secure bloodlines, and maintain the cosmic balance that keeps our worlds in harmony. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Your Majesty, I assure you, I never intended to suggest. Furthermore, the Emperor continued, by suggesting that our daughter should make such choices independently, you have implied that we, her parents and rulers, are inadequate guardians of the ancient traditions that have preserved our empire for 10,000 years. The court was completely silent now, and Marcus could feel hundreds of alien eyes focused on him. He glanced around desperately, looking for any sign of support from the small human diplomatic contingent that had accompanied him, but they were nowhere to be seen. Probably being held in some other part of the palace, or perhaps they had already been sent home with news of his impending execution. In our culture, Marcus said carefully, the right to choose one's life partner is considered fundamental. I was merely expressing surprise that such a vibrant and intelligent individual as the princess would not have the opportunity to select someone who truly understood and appreciated her unique qualities. This time the silence stretched so long that Marcus began to wonder if he had somehow given offense again. Then, Princess Lyralii spoke for the first time. "Father," the human raises an interesting point. Her voice was like crystal chimes in a gentle breeze, beautiful and otherworldly. Marcus looked at her directly for the first time since entering the throne room and was struck again by how alien yet familiar she seemed. There was something in her galaxy eyes that reminded him of curiosity, though he couldn't be sure if he was projecting human emotions onto an alien face. Interesting, Emperor Valethon's skin shifted toward a deeper blue, which Marcus was beginning to recognize as a sign of displeasure. "Daughter, this human has insulted our most sacred traditions." "Has he, father?" Princess Lyralii rose from her throne with that characteristic Zephyrian grace. "Or has he simply revealed his ignorance of them, and, in doing so, perhaps offered us an opportunity to demonstrate the strength and wisdom of our ways?" Marcus had no idea what she was talking about, but he was fairly certain his life hung in the balance of whatever point she was trying to make. "Explain yourself, Lyralii." The Empress spoke for the first time, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. "The human believes that freedom of choice in marriage leads to stronger, happier unions. This is clearly the primitive thinking of a young species that has not learned the deeper truths of cosmic harmony." Princess Lyralii began to walk down from the floating platform, her movements so fluid she seemed to be floating herself. "But what if we were to prove to him, and by extension to all of humanity, the superiority of our arranged marriage traditions?" Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He was beginning to suspect that whatever the princess had in mind, it was not going to improve his situation. "Continue," Emperor Valethon said, though his tone suggested he was not entirely pleased with the direction of the conversation. "I propose that we arrange a marriage that will serve as a demonstration of our superior wisdom. The human will serve as the groom in a traditional Zephyrian royal wedding, and I will be the bride. Through this union, he will learn the true meaning of cosmic harmony and the foolishness of his primitive beliefs about choice." The silence that followed this announcement was so complete that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Then the court erupted in what could only be described as shocked whispers, though with Zephyrians it sounded more like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Absolutely not." Emperor Valethon's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Lyralii, I will not have you sacrifice yourself to make a point about cultural superiority. It would not be a sacrifice, father. It will be a diplomatic triumph." Princess Lyralii had reached the bottom of the platform and was now walking toward Marcus. Think of it. The marriage of a Zephyrian princess to a human ambassador would create an unprecedented alliance between our species. The human would be forced to remain here, as is traditional for royal consorts, and over time he would come to understand the wisdom of our ways. Marcus finally found his voice. "Your Highness, while I'm honored by your proposal, I must point out that I never volunteer to be part of any demonstration of cultural superiority." Princess Lyralii stopped directly in front of him. Up close, her alien beauty was even more overwhelming. The patterns in her crystalline skin shifted and flowed like living art, and her galaxy eyes seemed to contain actual stars. "Ambassador Chun," she said softly, "you have two choices. You can accept this marriage proposal and live as an honored member of the royal family, free to continue your diplomatic work and serve as a bridge between our peoples. Or you can face execution for insulting the royal family, which will be unfortunate for both human-Zephyrian relations and your continued existence." Marcus stared at her, trying to process what had just happened. "That's not really much of a choice, is it?" "No," she replied, and for just a moment he thought he saw something that might have been amusement flicker in those cosmic eyes. "It is not." Emperor Valethon descended from his throne, his movements conveying barely controlled anger. Lyralii, this is madness. You cannot marry this primitive creature simply to prove a philosophical point. Father, you have always taught me that the needs of the empire come before personal desires. This marriage would secure the mineral rights that the humans seek while ensuring that Earth remains subordinate to our empire. It would also provide us with detailed knowledge of human psychology and culture through close observation of our new royal consort. Empress Valonia joined her husband, her crystalline features reflecting concern. Daughter, the human may not survive the bonding process. Their neural structure is so different from ours. Then, we will adapt the ceremony accordingly. If he dies, it will simply prove the inherent weakness of his species. If he survives, he will be transformed into something more suited to royal life. Marcus held up his hands. Excuse me, your majesties, but could we possibly discuss this transformation aspect in a bit more detail? Preferably before anyone starts making irreversible decisions about my neural structure. Princess Lyralii turned back to him, and this time he was certain he saw amusement in her expression. The royal bonding process creates a psychic connection between spouses that allows them to share thoughts, emotions, and even some memories. It is what makes Zephyrian marriages so strong and harmonious. However, human minds may not be compatible with our psychic frequencies. And if they're not compatible, Marcus asked, though he was fairly certain he didn't want to hear the answer. Then, your brain would likely shut down from the overload, she replied matter-of-factly. But you would die knowing that you contributed to interspecies understanding. Marcus looked around the throne room at hundreds of alien faces watching him with what appeared to be scientific curiosity. He thought about his life back on Earth, his career, his family, his small apartment with the view of the old oak tree outside his window. Then, he thought about the alternative being offered here. How long do I have to consider this proposal? He asked. The ceremony would take place in 3 days, Emperor Valethon said grimly. That will give us time to prepare the necessary modifications to protect your primitive neural system, assuming you accept. And if I refuse, then you will be executed at dawn tomorrow for insulting the royal family, the emperor replied. The offense cannot go unpunished, and death is the traditional penalty. Marcus looked at Princess Lyralii, trying to read something, anything, in her alien features that might give him a clue about her real motivations. Was this really just about proving cultural superiority? Or is there something else going on here? Princess, he said carefully, may I ask you a direct question? She inclined her head slightly, which he took as permission. Do you actually want to marry me? Or am I just a convenient test subject for your theory about arranged marriages? For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, she replied, Ambassador Chun, one is a human concept. I'm a royal daughter of the Zephyrian Empire. What I want is irrelevant. What matters is duty, tradition, and the good of the empire. That's not really an answer to my question. Is the only answer I can give you. Marcus nodded slowly. There was definitely something more going on here, but he was beginning to realize that he might never understand the full truth. Zephyrians were clearly far more complex than humans had assumed, and their royal family most complex of all. Very well, he said finally, I accept the marriage proposal. The reaction from the court was immediate and dramatic. Waves of colored light rippled through the assembled Zephyrians as they communicated in their complex visual language. Emperor Valethon's skin darkened to an almost navy blue, while Empress Valonia's took on silver highlights that Marcus hadn't seen before. You are certain of this decision? The Emperor asked. There will be no opportunity to change your mind once the preparations begin. I'm certain, Marcus replied, though he was anything but. Though I would appreciate any information you could provide about what exactly I'm agreeing to. Princess Lyralii stepped closer to him, and Marcus caught a scent like ozone and starlight. You are agreeing to become my consort, to live in the royal palace, and to serve as an ambassador between our peoples. You will have access to knowledge and technology beyond human comprehension, but you will never again be able to return to Earth as you were. What do you mean as I were? The bonding process changes both participants. You will gain some of our abilities, our extended lifespan, our enhanced senses. But you will also lose some of your purely human characteristics. You will become something new, something between human and Zephyrian. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. And this is reversible. No, she replied simply. It is not. He looked around the throne room one more time, at the impossible architecture and the beautiful alien beings watching him with their cosmic eyes. 3 days ago, he had been planning what to have for lunch during his flight to the Zephyrian homeworld. Now he was agreeing to become something that had never existed before, bound to an alien princess in a marriage that would redefine what it meant to be human. I understand, he said, though he understood almost nothing at all. I accept all the conditions. Emperor Valethon exchanged a long look with his wife, their skin colors shifting in patterns that Marcus assumed was some form of private communication. Finally, the emperor nodded. Very well. The wedding will take place in 3 days. Until then, you will remain as our guest in the royal palace. Arrangements will be made for your comfort, and you will receive instruction in our customs and traditions. Thank you, Your Majesty, Marcus replied, though he wasn't entirely sure what he was thanking him for. Do not thank me yet, human, Emperor Valethon said grimly. You may not survive what you have agreed to undergo, and if you do survive, you may find that the life you have chosen is far more challenging than the death you have avoided. As the court began to disperse, Princess Lyralii remained beside Marcus. When they were relatively alone, she spoke quietly. Ambassador Chun, I must ask you something, and I require an honest answer. Of course, Your Highness. Are you accepting this marriage because you believe you have no choice, or because you are curious about what we might accomplish together? Marcus looked at her carefully. It was the first time since this whole bizarre situation had begun that she had asked him something that sounded personally motivated rather than politically calculated. Honestly, both. I definitely feel like I don't have much choice in the matter. But I have to admit, I'm curious about you, about your people, about what kind of partnership we might be able to create. And I suppose, if I'm being completely honest, about whether there's more to this proposal than cultural demonstration. Something shifted in her expression, so subtle he might have imagined it. You may find that curiosity can be a dangerous quality in a royal consort. More dangerous than marrying someone whose neural structure might not survive the bonding process. Much more dangerous, she replied seriously. Curiosity leads to questions. Questions lead to understanding. And understanding, Ambassador Chun, has a way of changing everything. With that cryptic warning, she turned and glided away, leaving Marcus alone in the vast throne room with nothing but alien architecture and the growing certainty that he had just agreed to something far more complicated than a simple arranged marriage. The next 3 days passed in a blur of alien customs, impossible lessons, and growing dread mixed with fascination. Marcus was assigned quarters in the royal wing of the palace, rooms that defied human understanding of space and geometry. The walls seemed to extend infinitely upward, and the windows looked out onto landscapes that shifted and changed depending on his mood or the time of day. His instructor in Zephyrian customs was a stern elderly Zephyrian named Korath, whose skin was more white than blue and whose galaxy eyes had faded to a soft silver. Korath had served the royal family for over 2 centuries and had strong opinions about the appropriateness of humans joining the royal line. Ambassador Chun, Korath said on the second day of instruction, you must understand that royal marriage in Zephyrian culture is not merely a union of 2 individuals. It is a cosmic event that affects the balance of the universe itself. Marcus, who was still struggling to understand why his breakfast had been served on plates that floated 3 feet above the table, tried to focus on the lesson. Could you elaborate on that, Korath? The cosmic balance part, I mean. Each royal bloodline carries certain energetic frequencies that help maintain stability across multiple dimensions. When 2 bloodlines merge through marriage, those frequencies must harmonize or reality itself can be damaged. Reality can be damaged by a bad marriage. Korth's skin shifted toward yellow, which Marcus had learned indicated either amusement or mild disgust. With Korth, it was usually the latter. Ambassador, your species thinks in such primitive terms. You believe that consciousness and reality are separate things, that your thoughts and emotions have no effect on the physical universe. This is why humans are so destructive and chaotic. Marcus decided not to take offense at the casual dismissal of his entire species. So when Princess Laurelii and I are bonded, our thoughts will affect reality. If you survive the bonding, your combined consciousness will become part of the royal matrix that helps maintain cosmic stability. Your thoughts, emotions, and decisions will have consequences that ripple across space and time. No pressure, Marcus muttered. Indeed, the pressure is immense, Korth replied, apparently missing the sarcasm, which is why royal marriages are so carefully arranged. The Emperor and Empress have spent decades analyzing Princess Laurelii's energetic signature to determine the most compatible partner for her. That you, a chaotic human with completely unknown psychic frequencies, have been substituted for their carefully chosen candidate is deeply disturbing to everyone involved. Marcus looked up from his floating breakfast, suddenly alert. Carefully chosen candidate? You mean the princess was already supposed to marry someone else? Korth's skin went completely white, which Marcus had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of a human going pale. I have said too much. Please forget my words, Ambassador. But Marcus was not about to forget anything. Korth, who was Princess Laurelii supposed to marry? I cannot discuss matters of royal marriage arrangements with an outsider. I'm going to be her husband in less than 24 hours. That hardly makes me an outsider. Korth studied him for a long moment, his ancient eyes seeming to weigh Marcus's worthiness. Finally, he spoke. Prince Zoltran of the hegemony. The union was to have secured peace between our empire and theirs, ending a conflict that has lasted 3 centuries. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. And now that Princess Laurelii is marrying me instead, now there will be war, Korth said simply. Prince Zoltran considers the cancellation of the engagement to be an unforgivable insult. His fleets are already gathering at the border of our space. Does the princess know about this? Of course she knows. She is the one who suggested this marriage in the first place, knowing full well the consequences. Marcus stared at his instructor, trying to process this information. So, she's willing to start a war just to prove a point about arranged marriages? Ambassador Chun, Korth said softly, if you believe that proving a philosophical point is Princess Laurelii's true motivation for this marriage, then you understand nothing about the Zephyrian royal family or the situation you have walked into. Before Marcus could ask any more questions, the door to his quarters dissolved into sparkles of light, and Princess Laurelii entered. She was dressed in what appeared to be a gown made of living starlight, and her presence seemed to make the room itself brighter. Korth, she said pleasantly, I hope you are not filling my future husband's head with unnecessary concerns on the eve of our wedding. Korth bowed deeply. Of course not, Your Highness. I was merely explaining the cosmic significance of royal marriage. Excellent. Would you mind giving Ambassador Chun and me some privacy? I wish to speak with him before tomorrow's ceremony. Korth bowed again and left through the dissolving door, but not before giving Marcus a look that clearly said, you are in far more trouble than you realize. When they were alone, Princess Laurelii approached Marcus's floating breakfast table. With a gesture, she caused 2 chairs to form from the crystalline floor, and they sat facing each other. Ambassador Chun, tomorrow we will be bound together in ways that neither of us can fully comprehend. Before that happens, I believe we should be completely honest with each other. Marcus looked at her, this alien princess who was about to become his wife, and decided that if he was going to die or be transformed into something inhuman, he might as well know the truth first. All right, Your Highness, let's be honest. Why are you really marrying me? And Please don't tell me it's to demonstrate the superiority of arranged marriages or to strengthen diplomatic relations. Korath just told me that this marriage is going to start a war with the hegemony. Princess Lyralii was quiet for so long that Marcus began to wonder if she was going to answer at all. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. My people believe that the universe speaks to us through patterns, through seemingly random events that reveal deeper truths. When you insulted our marriage customs, it was not truly an insult. It was the universe providing me with an opportunity to escape a fate that would have destroyed me. The marriage to Prince Zoltran? Prince Zoltran is not merely arrogant and cruel, though he is both of those things. He is something darker. His psychic signature is tainted with what we call the void touch, a corruption that spreads through mental contact. If I had bonded with him, that corruption would have spread through the royal matrix and eventually consumed our entire empire. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. And your parents don't know this? They know, but they believe the political alliance is worth the risk. They think that my mental discipline is strong enough to contain the corruption. They are wrong. So you're marrying me to avoid being corrupted by an evil alien prince? I am marrying you because your mind is completely unlike ours. Human consciousness operates on different frequencies, follows different patterns. When we bond, your chaotic human thoughts may be exactly what we need to break the patterns that would otherwise doom us all. Marcus leaned back in his chair, trying to process everything she had told him. So, I'm not just a test subject or a diplomatic solution. I'm some kind of cosmic wild card. You are hope, Ambassador Chun. Desperate, impossible hope. They sat in silence for a moment, looking at each other across a gulf of species, culture, and understanding that seemed impossibly vast. Finally, Marcus spoke. Princess, can I ask you one more question? Of course. In all of this cosmic balance and desperate hope and political maneuvering, is there any room for us to actually get to know each other? To maybe, eventually, care about each other as individuals rather than as solutions to interstellar problems? Princess Lyralii smiled, and for the first time since he had met her, Marcus saw something in her expression that was purely personal, purely her. That, Ambassador Chun, is what I'm hoping for most of all. The wedding day arrived with phenomena that Marcus was beginning to understand were normal for Zephyria, but still made his human brain struggle to process reality. The twin suns rose in different colors, one blazing orange and the other a cool blue, casting the palace in shadows that shifted between warm gold and ethereal silver. The very air seemed to hum with anticipation, and Marcus could swear he heard music coming from the crystal walls themselves. He stood in his quarters, staring at his reflection in what Korath had assured him was a mirror, though it showed not just his image, but also shifting patterns of light that seemed to represent his emotional state. Currently, those patterns were a chaotic swirl of gold, red, and deep purple, which apparently translated to terrified, but determined with undertones of existential confusion. The wedding outfit that had been prepared for him was unlike anything he had ever seen. It appeared to be made of the same crystalline material as Zephyrian skin, but adapted somehow to cover his human form. When he moved, it moved with him like liquid light, and he could feel it responding to his body temperature and heart rate. Most unsettling of all, it seemed to be alive in some subtle way, pulsing gently with its own rhythm. Ambassador Chun. Korath's voice came from behind him, though the elderly Zephyrian had not been there a moment before. Marcus was getting used to the way Zephyrians could appear and disappear at will, though it still made him jump. Please tell me you're not going to give me any more disturbing information about what I'm about to undergo, Marcus said, still staring at his reflection. On the contrary, I come with potentially encouraging news. Our medical technicians have completed their analysis of your neural structure, and they believe you have a 73% chance of surviving the bonding process. Marcus turned to look at Korath directly. That's encouraging news? What happened to the other 27% in their calculations? Complete neural shutdown resulting in immediate death, Korath replied matter-of-factly. However, this is much better odds than we initially estimated. It appears that human consciousness is more adaptable than we assumed. Wonderful. And what about the void touch corruption that Princess Lyralii mentioned? Any thoughts on how my chaotic human brain is supposed to deal with that? Korath's skin shifted to a color Marcus had never seen before, something between silver and green with sparks of gold running through it. It was either a very good sign or a very bad one. Ambassador, that is perhaps the most interesting aspect of this entire situation. Our analysis suggests that human consciousness may be naturally resistant to void touch corruption precisely because it is so chaotic and unpredictable. The corruption spreads by following established mental patterns, but human minds seem to create new patterns constantly. So my short attention span and tendency to overthink everything might actually be useful. More than useful. Essential. Marcus nodded slowly, trying to absorb yet another piece of information that redefined everything he thought he understood about his situation. Is there anything else I should know before I go get married to an alien princess and potentially save the universe? Yes, Korath said seriously. Do not let them know you are afraid. The court, the nobles, the military commanders who will be watching this ceremony. They already see you as a weak primitive who has somehow seduced their princess into abandoning her duty. If they sense fear, they will lose what little respect they might have had for you. Marcus looked at himself in the mirror again. The light patterns around his reflection were still chaotic, but there were new threads of silver running through them now. Determination, maybe, or possibly just acceptance of the inevitable. Korath, can I ask you something personal? You may ask, do you think this marriage is going to work? Not the political aspects or the cosmic balance stuff. Do you think Princess Lyralii and I can actually build something together? The elderly Zephyrian studied Marcus for a long moment, his ancient eyes seeming to look right through him. Finally, he spoke. Ambassador Chun, in my 2.5 centuries of life, I have seen many royal marriages. Some were successful political alliances, others were disasters that nearly destroyed the empire. But I have never seen a royal daughter risk everything the way Princess Lyralii is risking everything for you. Whether that will lead to happiness or catastrophe, I cannot say. But it will certainly not be boring. Before Marcus could respond to this less than reassuring assessment, the walls of his quarters began to glow with soft blue light. It was time. The ceremony took place in the grand atrium, a vast space at the heart of the palace that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. As Marcus was led through corridors that bent and twisted in ways that hurt his brain, he could see through transparent walls that the space was filling with beings from across the galaxy. There were Zephyrians, of course, their crystalline skin creating a sea of shifting colors and patterns. But there were also other species Marcus had never seen before. Tall, ethereal beings that seemed to be made of light itself. Creatures that appeared to be living geometric shapes, constantly folding and unfolding into new configurations. Things that might have been sentient plants or possibly rocks with consciousness. The diversity was overwhelming and beautiful and more than a little terrifying. The entire Galactic Council has sent representatives, Korath explained as they walked. This marriage is being watched by every major civilization in known space. That's comforting, Marcus muttered. It should be. If you survive, you will instantly become one of the most important beings in the galaxy. If you die, it will be witnessed by everyone who matters. I can't decide if you're trying to encourage me or terrify me. Both seem appropriate under the circumstances. They reached the entrance to the grand atrium, and Marcus got his first full view of the space where he was about to be married. It was impossible. The floor was made of what appeared to be crystallized starlight, reflecting not just light, but actual images of distant galaxies. The walls curved upward and inward, creating a dome that seemed to contain actual space, complete with slowly moving planets and nebulae. Floating platforms of various sizes held the assembled guests, and Marcus could see beings using a dozen different forms of travel to move between them. In the center of it all was a raised platform that appeared to be carved from a single massive gemstone. On that platform stood Princess Lyralii, and Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. She was radiant in ways that transcended mere beauty. Her wedding gown seemed to be woven from aurora light itself, shifting between colors that had no names in any human language. Her crystalline skin blazed with patterns of silver and gold that pulsed in rhythm with some cosmic heartbeat. But it was her eyes that caught and held Marcus's attention. The swirling galaxies he had grown accustomed to seeing there had been replaced by something that looked like the birth of stars. "She is magnificent," he whispered, not really meaning to speak aloud. "Yes," Korth agreed, "and in approximately 10 minutes she will be bonded to you for eternity, or you will be dead. Try not to embarrass our species during the ceremony." Marcus walked down the aisle between floating platforms full of alien dignitaries, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. The various species watched him with expressions he couldn't read, though he was fairly certain most of them were skeptical about the wisdom of this union. As he approached the central platform, he could see Emperor Veilthon and Empress Veolonia standing to one side. The Emperor's skin was a deep, angry blue that suggested he was still not happy about this turn of events. The Empress was harder to read, her crystalline features showing the kind of controlled emotion that Marcus had learned usually meant a Zephyrian was experiencing multiple conflicting feelings simultaneously. Princess Lyralii watched him approach with those starfield eyes, and as he drew closer, Marcus thought he could hear something like music coming from her direction. It wasn't sound exactly, more like a harmonic vibration that seemed to resonate in his bones. "Ambassador Chun," she said softly as he stepped onto the platform beside her, "are you ready to become something new?" "As ready as someone can be for something they don't understand," he replied. "That may be the most honest thing anyone has ever said at a royal wedding," she said, and Marcus was certain he heard amusement in her voice. The ceremony began with rituals that Marcus had been taught, but still didn't fully comprehend. There were invocations to cosmic forces, exchanges of crystalline objects that seemed to contain miniature galaxies, and at one point Princess Lyralii placed her hand on his forehead and spoke words in a language that predated the formation of stars. But the real ceremony, Marcus realized, was happening in the spaces between the formal rituals. Every time Princess Lyralii looked at him, every small gesture and movement was communicating something important. She was reassuring him, encouraging him, and, perhaps most surprisingly, showing genuine concern for his well-being. "Now comes the bonding," announced the officiant, an ancient Zephyrian whose skin was so pale it was almost transparent. "Let all witnesses observe as two minds become one, as two souls learn to share a single cosmic frequency." Princess Lyralii turned to face Marcus directly, taking both of his hands in hers. Her skin was warm despite its crystalline appearance, and he could feel a subtle vibration running through her fingers. "Marcus," she said, using his first name for the first time, "I need you to trust me completely. The bonding process will feel like dying and being reborn simultaneously. Do not fight it. Let your consciousness merge with mine, and I will guide us both through the transformation." Marcus looked in her eyes, seeing galaxies and nebulae and the birth of worlds, and nodded. "I trust you, Lyralii." The change in her expression when he spoke her name was subtle but unmistakable. For just a moment, the cosmic princess disappeared, and he saw something purely personal, purely her, looking back at him with what might have been gratitude. "Then, let us begin," she said. The bonding started as a gentle warmth in his hands where they touched hers. Then the warmth spread up his arms, and Marcus realized it wasn't just physical sensation. Something was moving through his nervous system, something alien and beautiful and completely overwhelming. His vision began to change. The grand atrium was still there, but now he could see the energy patterns that flowed through it. The assembled guests weren't just physical beings anymore, but complex networks of consciousness and emotion and memory. The space itself pulsed with life and intelligence that he had never suspected existed. "Stay with me." Princess Laurelia's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, no longer heard but felt directly in his mind. "Let me show you what we truly are." Suddenly, Marcus was no longer standing in his own body. He was experiencing consciousness as Princess Laurelii experienced it, seeing reality through senses he didn't have names for. He could feel the cosmic forces that held the galaxy together, could sense the delicate balance that kept civilizations from destroying themselves, could perceive the threads of connection that linked every living being across space and time. But more than that, he could feel Laurelii's mind directly. Her thoughts, her memories, her emotions, all flowing through his consciousness like streams of liquid starlight. And what he found, there was nothing like what he had expected. She was lonely, desperately, profoundly lonely in ways that Marcus hadn't imagined possible. For her entire life, she had been surrounded by beings who saw her not as an individual, but as a symbol, a tool of statecraft, a cosmic force to be managed and directed. She had never been allowed to simply be herself, had never been permitted to form relationships based on mutual interest and affection rather than political necessity. And there is something else, something darker lurking at the edges of her consciousness. The void-touch corruption she had spoken of wasn't theoretical. Marcus could sense it like a shadow at the edge of perception, a creeping wrongness that sought to drain the light and life from everything it touched. She had been fighting it alone for years, using her own mental discipline to keep it from spreading through the royal matrix. "Now you understand," her mental voice whispered to him. "Now you see why I needed someone whose mind works differently than ours." Marcus felt his own consciousness expanding as the bonding process continued. He was still himself, but he was also becoming something more. His human thoughts and emotions were being translated into frequencies that could harmonize with Zephyrian consciousness, while retaining the chaotic unpredictability that made them unique. And then he felt the void touch trying to spread into his mind. It was like ice water flowing through his thoughts, seeking to freeze and corrupt everything it touched. But where it expected to find the ordered patterns of Zephyrian consciousness, it encountered something completely different. Marcus's human mind was a maze of contradictions, random associations, half-remembered dreams, and emotional tangents that led nowhere. The corruption couldn't follow the pathways because there were no consistent pathways to follow. "It's working." Princess Laurelii's mental voice was filled with wonder and relief. "Your chaos is confusing it. It cannot establish a foothold in your consciousness." Marcus felt a surge of something that might have been triumph, but the bonding process was far from over. Now came the most dangerous part, where their two different forms of consciousness had to learn to exist in harmony without losing their essential natures. Pain exploded through his nervous system as alien thoughts tried to integrate with human neural pathways. For a moment, Marcus was certain that he was going to be one of the 27% who didn't survive. His vision went white, his hearing filled with static, and he felt his sense of self beginning to dissolve. But then Princess Laurelii was there, her consciousness wrapping around as like a protective embrace. She guided his awareness through the transformation, showing him how to maintain his human identity while allowing Zephyrian abilities to enhance rather than replace his natural capabilities. When the pain finally faded, Marcus found himself standing once again in the grand atrium, but everything was different. He could see not just the physical forms of the assembled beings, but their emotional states, their surface thoughts, their connections to each other, and to the cosmic forces that shaped the galaxy. And he was still connected to Princess Laurelii, though the intensity of the initial bonding had settled into something more manageable. He could sense her presence in his mind like a warm light, and he knew she could sense his in return. "The bonding is complete," announced the officiant, though Marcus had been so absorbed in the mental transformation that he had forgotten anyone else was present. "Behold, Princess Laurelii and Prince Marcus of the Zephyrian Empire." The assembled crowd erupted in sounds that Marcus's enhanced senses could now identify as approval, curiosity, concern, and, in some cases, outright hostility. But what surprised him most was the wave of hope that seemed to emanate from many of the Zephyrian nobles. They had felt the void-touch corruption being contained, had sensed the stabilizing effect of his chaotic human consciousness on the royal matrix. "How do you feel?" Princess Laurelii asked, though now her words carried harmonics of meaning that went far beyond simple language. Marcus took inventory of his new state of being. He was still fundamentally human, but enhanced in ways he was only beginning to understand. His vision now included spectrums of light that had names and languages that predated Earth. His hearing caught the musical mathematics of the spheres. His sense of touch could feel the vibrations of cosmic forces. And, through it all, he remained recognizably himself. "I feel like I've been given a new set of senses, but haven't learned how to use them yet," he replied honestly. "That will come with time. What matters now is that you survived, and the corruption has been contained." Marcus looked around at the assembled beings, realizing that his new senses allowed him to perceive things about them that would have been invisible before. He could see the network of relationships and alliances that connected the various species, could sense the political tensions and ancient grudges that shaped galactic civilization. And he could see something else, something that made his enhanced human intuition suddenly go cold. "Laurelii," he said quietly, using their new mental connection rather than speaking aloud. "We have a problem. What do you see?" Marcus focused his attention on a group of beings near the edge of the Grand Atrium. They appeared to be standard diplomatic observers, but his enhanced senses were picking up something wrong about them. Their emotional signatures were too controlled, too perfect, and there was something familiar about the underlying pattern of their consciousness. "Those observers on the hegemony platform," he continued mentally. "They're not just diplomats, are they?" Princess Laurelii's consciousness touched his, sharing his perception and coming to the same disturbing conclusion. Void touched. All of them. And they're not just observing the ceremony. They're mapping the royal matrix through our bonding connection. They're planning to spread the corruption directly through the new pathways we just created. The realization hit both of them simultaneously. This had been a trap from the beginning. Prince Zoltran hadn't simply been offended by the canceled engagement. He had been planning to use the wedding ceremony itself as a weapon, allowing his void-touched agents to infiltrate the royal palace and corrupt the very foundations of Zephyrian civilization. "We have to warn your parents," Marcus said, but Princess Laurelii's mental response stopped him. "If we alert the court now, it will cause a panic that could destabilize the bonding matrix we just created, and the void-touched agents will simply retreat and try again later when we're not expecting them." Marcus felt her mind working through possibilities at speeds that his human consciousness couldn't match, but he could sense the direction of her thoughts, and it made him nervous. "What are you planning, Laurelii?" "We're going to do something that no one will expect, something so chaotic and unpredictable that it will disrupt their entire plan." "Which is?" Princess Laurelii turned to look at him directly, and Marcus saw something in her expression that was part determination, part mischief, and part pure alien princess. "We're going to unleash chaos, my dear husband. Human chaos, amplified by Zephyrian power and completely unrestrained by political considerations." Marcus felt a chill run through his enhanced nervous system. That sounds like it could destroy everything. It could, or it could save everything. But it will definitely be interesting. Before Marcus could ask any more questions, Princess Laurelii stepped forward and raised her voice to address the assembled beings. "Honored guests," she announced, her words carrying across the grand atrium with the force of royal authority. My husband, and I thank you for witnessing our bonding. But before we conclude this ceremony, we have become aware of a situation that requires immediate attention. The crowd fell silent, thousands of alien beings focusing their attention on the newly bonded royal couple. There are those among you who have come not to celebrate, but to corrupt, those who serve the void touch and seek to spread its influence through the very bonds we have just created. A ripple of alarm passed through the assembled beings, and Marcus could see the hegemony observers beginning to move toward the exits. But Princess Laurelii continued, her voice taking on harmonics that seemed to resonate with the crystal walls themselves. They have made one critical error in their calculations. What error? Called out a voice from the crowd. Princess Laurelii smiled, and Marcus felt her consciousness touch his with warm amusement. They assumed that bonding with a human would make me more predictable, she replied. They were wrong. She raised her hand, and Marcus felt power flowing through their connection, his chaotic human consciousness amplifying and directing Zephyrian abilities in ways that should have been impossible. Let me show you what happens when human chaos meets royal authority. The grand atrium exploded into light and music and forces that Marcus didn't have names for. The void-touched agents who had been trying to escape found themselves frozen in place, their corrupted consciousness suddenly exposed for all to see. The assembled beings gasped as the true extent of the hegemony's infiltration became visible, threads of darkness spreading through the diplomatic corps like veins of poison. But that was just the beginning. Princess Laurelii was using their bonded consciousness to do something that Marcus realized was completely unprecedented. She was creating a feedback loop that turned the void-touch corruption back on itself, using the chaotic unpredictability of human thought patterns to confuse and disrupt the spreading darkness. This is incredible, Marcus whispered, feeling their combined power reshaping the very fabric of space around them. This is dangerous, Princess Laurelii replied, though her mental voice carried undertones of exhilaration. Hold on, my dear husband. We're about to find out what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. The void-touched agents began to scream, their carefully controlled consciousness dissolving under the assault of pure, chaotic energy. But as their corruption was destroyed, it released waves of dark force that threatened to tear the grand atrium apart. Can we contain this? Marcus asked, watching reality bend and twist around them. I don't know, Princess Laurelii admitted, but we're certainly going to find out. Emperor Valethon's voice cut through the chaos with the authority of 10,000 years of royal bloodline. All beings evacuate the grand atrium immediately. This is not a request, but even as the assembled guests fled in various directions using methods of travel that defied physics, Marcus and Princess Laurelii remained at the center of the expanding chaos, their bonded consciousness the only thing standing between galactic civilization and the unleashed forces of entropy. Laurelii, Marcus said, his enhanced senses showing him cracks forming in the fundamental structure of space-time itself. I think we may have overdone it. Perhaps slightly, she admitted. Do you have any suggestions for how to fix this? Marcus looked around at the collapsing reality, the fleeing aliens, and the waves of corrupted energy that were spreading outward from the destroyed void-touched agents. His human brain, enhanced but still recognizably chaotic, suddenly had an idea. What's the most human thing I can think of right now? He asked. I have no idea. What? Marcus grinned, feeling absolutely insane and completely alive. Improvisation. Without warning, he grabbed Princess Laurelii's hand and jumped off the platform, pulling her with him into the swirling vortex of unleashed cosmic forces. Marcus, what are you doing? She screamed as they fell through folding space-time. Something completely unpredictable, he shouted back. Hang on. This is either going to work brilliantly or kill us both. Those are not comforting odds. Welcome to being married to a human. As they plummeted through the chaos they had created, Marcus felt their bonded consciousness reaching out to touch the fundamental forces that were tearing the grand atrium apart. Instead of trying to control them or contain them, he did the most human thing possible. He tried to communicate with them. "Hello there, cosmic entropy," he said, his thoughts somehow reaching the swirling darkness. "I know you're just trying to do your job, breaking things down and spreading chaos. But maybe we can work together instead of against each other." The response was not words or thoughts, but pure concept communicated directly to his consciousness. The entropy forces were not malevolent, merely following their nature. They had been corrupted and directed by the void touch, forced to spread destruction instead of their normal function of creating space for new growth and change. "What if we gave you something better to do?" Marcus continued, his human instincts somehow finding common ground with cosmic forces. "What if instead of destroying everything, you helped us transform it into something new?" Princess Lyraliai's consciousness joined his, her Zephyrian understanding of cosmic balance harmonizing with his chaotic human empathy. Together, they offered the entropy forces a new purpose. Not destruction for its own sake, but transformation in service of growth and renewal. The change was immediate and dramatic. The chaotic energy that had been tearing the grand atrium apart suddenly reversed direction, flowing inward and upward, reshaping and rebuilding instead of destroying. When the light faded and the cosmic forces settled into their new patterns, Marcus and Princess Lyraliai found themselves standing on solid ground in a space that was recognizably the grand atrium, but fundamentally transformed. The crystalline floors now pulsed with patterns that seemed to show the connections between all living beings in the galaxy. The walls displayed not just distant galaxies, but the possibilities for what those galaxies might become. And overhead, where there had once been a simple dome, there was now what appeared to be a window into the cosmic forces that shaped reality itself. "Well," Princess Lyraliai said, looking around at what they had created, "that was unexpected." Marcus was about to reply when he realized they were not alone. The grand atrium was filled with beings, but not the same beings who had been there for the wedding. These were the assembled representatives of every major civilization in the galaxy, including many that Marcus was certain had not been invited to the original ceremony. "How did they all get here?" he asked. "I believe," Princess Lyraliai said slowly, "that our little improvisation with cosmic entropy may have had some unintended consequences. It appears we have created a space that exists partially outside normal space-time. Is that good or bad? Given that we now have the attention of every major power in the galaxy, including several that we were not previously aware of, I would say it is complicated." Marcus looked around at the assembled beings, his enhanced senses picking up currents of curiosity, concern, and calculation. Then his attention was caught by one figure in particular. Prince Zoltran stood at the edge of the gathered crowd, his form tall and imposing even by alien standards. But where Marcus had expected to see the void-touch corruption that Princess Lyraliai had warned him about, he instead sensed something else entirely. "Lyraliai," he said quietly, "I don't think Prince Zoltran is the enemy here." "What do you mean?" Marcus focused his enhanced perception on the hegemony prince, reading the patterns of his consciousness and energy signature. What he found there was not corruption, but something that looked remarkably like relief. "He's not void-touched. He never was. I think someone has been playing a much more complex game than any of us realized." Before Princess Lyraliai could respond, Prince Zoltran stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly across the transformed grand atrium. "Princess Lyraliai, Prince Marcus," he said with what appeared to be genuine respect, "I believe it is time we discussed what really happened here today. All of us have been manipulated, but your creative solution has revealed truths that were meant to remain hidden." Marcus felt Princess Lyraliai's consciousness touch his with curiosity and caution. "What truths, Prince Zoltran?" The hegemony prince gestured to the assembled beings around them. "The truth about who has been spreading void-touch corruption through the galaxy. The truth about why your marriage was so important to stop, and the truth about what your new form of bonded consciousness might mean for the future of all our civilizations. Marcus looked around at the impossible space they had created, at the beings from across the galaxy who had somehow been drawn here, and at his alien princess wife whose consciousness was intertwined with his in ways that were still revealing new possibilities. "Something tells me," he said, "that our wedding was just the beginning of a much larger adventure." Princess Lyraliai's hand found his, and he felt her agreement through their bonded consciousness. Indeed it was, "My dear husband." Indeed it was. The transformed Grand Atrium had become something unprecedented in galactic history. A space where representatives from civilizations that had been enemies for millennia could stand in the same room without immediately trying to kill each other. Marcus was beginning to suspect that their improvised solution to the void touch corruption had done more than just save the day. It had fundamentally altered the nature of diplomatic relations across the galaxy. 3 days after what the various news networks were calling either the wedding of the century or the reality-breaking incident, depending on their political affiliations, Marcus found himself sitting in what had once been a simple conference room, but was now a space where the walls displayed real-time information about the political and economic status of every civilization represented. "Husband," Princess Lyraliai said, settling into a chair that formed itself from the crystalline floor as she approached, "I believe we may have underestimated the consequences of our actions." Marcus looked up from the holographic displays he had been studying, his enhanced human senses still struggling to process information that came from sources he didn't have names for. "Which particular consequences are you referring to? The fact that we accidentally created a space-time anomaly that has become the de facto neutral meeting ground for the entire galaxy? Or the fact that every major civilization now wants to either ally with us or destroy us?" "Both, actually, though I was more specifically concerned about the third consequence we discovered this morning." "The marriage proposals?" "The marriage proposals." Marcus rubbed his temples, a human gesture that still provided comfort, even though his enhanced nervous system processed pain and stress differently now. In the 3 days since their wedding, they had received 47 formal requests from various royal families, noble houses, and governmental entities asking for arranged marriages between their children and any hypothetical future children that Marcus and Lyraliai might produce. "I still don't understand the logic behind that," Marcus admitted. "We don't even know if humans and Zephyrians can have children together." "That is precisely why they are so interested," Lyraliai explained, her consciousness touching his with gentle amusement. "The possibility of creating beings with both human chaos resistance and Zephyrian cosmic sensitivity is apparently very appealing to civilizations that have been struggling with void touch corruption for centuries." Before Marcus could respond, the air in the conference room shimmered, and Prince Zoltran appeared, using what Marcus had learned was a standard hegemony transportation technique that folded space around the traveler. "Your Highnesses," Prince Zoltran said, inclining his head respectfully, "I hope you will forgive the intrusion, but we have received some disturbing intelligence that requires immediate attention." Marcus gestured to a chair, which obligingly formed itself from the floor. He was still getting used to the way the transformed palace responded to his thoughts and intentions, apparently interpreting his human expectations and making them reality through methods he didn't understand. "Please join us, and you can call me Marcus. The whole Your Highness thing is going to get old quickly." Prince Zoltran settled into the offered chair, his imposing form somehow managing to look elegant even in furniture that had spontaneously generated itself. "Very well, Marcus. What I am about to tell you may change your understanding of the current galactic situation entirely." Princess Lyraliai leaned forward, her enhanced senses apparently picking up something in Prince Zoltran's manner that suggested serious concern. "What kind of intelligence?" "We have discovered the true source of the void touch corruption that has been spreading through the galaxy for the past several centuries. It is not a natural phenomenon. nor is it the result of reckless experimentation by any known civilization. Marcus felt a chill run through his enhanced nervous system. What is it? It appears to be a weapon created by a civilization that we thought had been extinct for over 50,000 years. The Architects. The name hit Marcus's consciousness like a physical blow, carrying with it implications and associations that his human brain couldn't quite process, but his enhanced senses understood immediately. The Architects had been the first truly galactic civilization, builders of megastructures that span star systems and masters of technologies that current civilizations could barely comprehend. "That's impossible," Princess Lyrelii said, though her mental voice carried undertones of uncertainty. "The Architects disappeared long before any of our current civilizations achieved spaceflight. Even the oldest races have only legends about them." "That is what we believed," Prince Zoltran agreed. "But the Void Touch corruption shows technological signatures that match architect artifacts we have discovered over the millennia. More importantly, our analysis of the corruption you two destroyed during your wedding has revealed coded information that could only come from an active architect intelligence." Marcus felt Princess Lyrelii's consciousness merge more fully with his as she shared her knowledge of galactic history. Through their bonded awareness, he could see the vast scope of what Prince Zoltran was suggesting. If the Architects were still active somewhere in a galaxy, it would redefine everything about the current political and technological balance of power. Why would a civilization that advanced need to use something like Void Touch corruption? Marcus asked. If they have technology that's 50,000 years ahead of everyone else, why not just take over directly? That, Prince Zoltran said grimly, is exactly what we are afraid they may be preparing to do. The corruption appears to have been a reconnaissance tool, mapping the consciousness patterns and technological capabilities of every major civilization. Now that they have that information, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Marcus's enhanced intuition was already filling in the implications, and none of them were good. "So what do we do?" Marcus asked, "and please don't tell me that the solution involves more improvisation with cosmic forces. I'm still trying to figure out what we did the first time." "Actually," Princess Lyrelii said slowly, "improvisation may be exactly what we need. Think about it, Marcus. The Architects have had 50,000 years to study galactic civilization, to understand how we think and react and organize ourselves. But they have never encountered anything like human consciousness patterns before, because humans are too young a species to have been included in their original survey." Prince Zoltran added, his expression showing what Marcus was learning to recognize as alien thoughtfulness. "Your chaotic unpredictability is not just resistant to Void Touch corruption. It is completely outside the parameters of architect understanding." Marcus looked between his alien wife and the alien prince who had somehow become an ally, feeling the weight of impossible expectations settling on his shoulders once again. "So you're saying that the entire galaxy is depending on my ability to be chaotic and unpredictable?" "We are saying," Princess Lyrelii replied, her consciousness touching his with warmth and confidence, "that the entire galaxy is depending on our ability to combine human chaos with Zephyrian cosmic sensitivity in ways that no one, including us, can predict in advance." Before Marcus could respond to this assessment, which was somehow both reassuring and terrifying, the conference room was suddenly filled with additional beings as the walls dissolved to reveal a much larger space. Emperor Veilthon and Empress Velonia stood at the head of what had apparently become an emergency council session, their crystalline skin showing patterns of stress and determination. Around them were representatives from dozens of species, including some that Marcus didn't recognize and a few that he wasn't entirely sure were biological. "My apologies for the dramatic entrance," Emperor Veilthon announced, his voice carrying the authority of absolute rule. "But we have just received confirmation of Prince Zoltran's intelligence. The Architects are indeed active and they have issued what appears to be an ultimatum to the entire galaxy. A holographic display formed in the center of the expanded space, showing a message that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The text shifted and changed as Marcus looked at it, somehow conveying meaning directly to his consciousness rather than through his eyes. The message was simple in its implications and terrifying in its scope. To the current inhabitants of this galaxy, you have been evaluated and found deficient. Your civilizations lack the harmony and efficiency necessary for long-term galactic stability. Within one standard galactic year, you will submit to architect guidance and accept restructuring of your societies according to optimal parameters. Resistance will result in the implementation of corrective measures designed to ensure compliance. This communication represents your final opportunity to choose cooperation over conflict. The architects have returned. Well, Marcus said after a moment of silence that seemed to stretch across the entire assembly. That's not ominous at all. The message was transmitted simultaneously to every major government and military command in the galaxy. Empress Valonia explained, her voice carrying harmonics of barely controlled anger. It appeared directly in secured communication networks that should have been impossible to penetrate. How long do we have? Princess Lyralii asked, though her bonded consciousness was already sharing information with Marcus that suggested the timeline was not as simple as it appeared. The message was sent exactly 72 hours ago, Prince Zoltran replied, which means we have approximately 362 days before they expect our surrender. Marcus felt his enhanced senses picking up currents of fear, determination, and desperate calculation from the assembled beings. But there was something else, something that his human intuition was recognizing even if his alien allies were not. They're testing us, he said suddenly. The entire assembly turned to look at him, dozens of alien expressions showing various degrees of confusion. What do you mean? Emperor Valethon asked. Marcus stood up, his enhanced consciousness suddenly, making connections that his purely human brain would never have been able to process. The ultimatum, the timeline, even the way they delivered the message. It's all designed to provoke a specific response. What kind of response? Prince Zoltran asked, his imposing form leaning forward with interest. Panic, desperate alliance building, crash programs to develop new weapons and defensive technologies. All the things that galactic civilizations do when they're faced with an existential threat they can't handle individually. Princess Lyralii's consciousness merged more fully with his as she followed his reasoning. You think they want us to unite against them? I think they want to see how we respond to pressure. What technologies we develop, what alliances we form, how our various species work together under stress. They're not planning to wait a year before taking action. They're planning to study our response for a year and then act based on what they learn. The silence that followed this assessment was profound and uncomfortable. Finally, a voice spoke from somewhere in the crowd of assembled beings. If the human is correct, the voice said in tones that suggested a species Marcus had never encountered, then our traditional responses to such threats would simply provide our enemies with more information about our capabilities and limitations. Exactly, Marcus replied, his human experience with competitive strategy finally finding a useful application. Every military buildup, every technological crash program, every alliance negotiation would be giving them exactly the data they need to defeat us efficiently. Then, what do you suggest we do instead? Emperor Valethon asked, his skin patterns showing what Marcus was learning to interpret as grudging respect mixed with skepticism. Marcus looked around at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization, beings whose ancestors had been building interstellar empires when humans were still figuring out agriculture. The weight of their expectations and the scope of the problem they were facing should have been overwhelming. Instead, he felt his chaotic human brain start to generate ideas. We do something they won't expect, he said, his confidence growing as the possibilities began to multiply in his enhanced consciousness. something so completely outside their parameters that their 50,000 years of experience becomes irrelevant. Such as, Empress Valonia asked, though her tone suggested she was beginning to see the potential in human unpredictability. We ignore them completely. The reaction from the assembled beings was immediate and dramatic. Skin colors shifted, energy patterns fluctuated, and what Marcus was fairly certain were expressions of shock and outrage appeared on faces that had evolved on dozens of different worlds. Ignore them. Prince Zoltran's voice carried a note of disbelief. Marcus, they have technology that exceeds our capabilities by orders of magnitude. They could destroy any civilization in this galaxy without significant effort. Exactly, Marcus replied, his human perversity now fully engaged with the problem, which means that trying to fight them conventionally would be pointless. But if we ignore their ultimatum entirely, if we act like their threat is irrelevant to our decision-making, we force them to adapt to our behavior instead of the other way around. Princess Lyraliai's consciousness was now fully merged with his thought process, her Zephyrian understanding of cosmic patterns combining with his human strategic thinking. It would be the ultimate expression of chaos resistance, she said slowly. Instead of letting them define the parameters of our interaction, we would be defining those parameters ourselves. But what if they simply attack us for our defiance? Asked a being that appeared to be made of crystallized music. Marcus felt his enhanced senses reaching out to touch the collective consciousness of the assembled beings, sharing his growing certainty that conventional thinking would only lead to conventional defeat. Then, we improvise, he said simply. We do what humans do best. We make it up as we go along, we adapt faster than they can predict, and we turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. Their greatest strength being their advanced planning and superior technology, Princess Lyraliai added, her mental voice carrying growing excitement, which becomes a weakness if we create situations that can't be planned for and require abilities they don't possess. What abilities could we possibly have that they don't? Emperor Valethon asked, though his skin patterns were beginning to show something that looked like hope mixed with desperate calculation. Marcus grinned, feeling absolutely insane and completely confident simultaneously. The ability to be completely, utterly, and unpredictably human. The next 6 months were unlike anything in galactic history. Instead of uniting against the architect threat, the various civilizations began implementing what became known as the Chaos Protocol, a systematic approach to being completely unsystematic. Marcus and Princess Lyraliai became the coordinators of what was essentially a galaxy-wide improvisation experiment. Using their unique bonded consciousness as a communication hub, they helped facilitate interactions between species that had never worked together before, encouraged the development of technologies that served no logical purpose, and supported artistic and cultural projects that existed purely to confuse any intelligence trying to predict their behavior. The results were extraordinary and completely bizarre. The militant Krex Empire began a comprehensive program of interpretive dance as a form of military training. The Hyperlogical Synthesis Collective started incorporating random number generators into their decision-making processes. The Ethereal Chorus, beings of pure energy who had never bothered with physical form, began experimenting with origami. The architects must be having the worst headaches in galactic history trying to analyze our behavior patterns, Marcus said as he and Princess Lyraliai reviewed reports from across the galaxy. They were standing in what had once been the palace gardens, but had been transformed through their continued interaction with cosmic forces into something that looked like a combination botanical garden, particle physics laboratory, and abstract art installation. Plants grew in geometric patterns that somehow produced mathematical equations when viewed from different angles, while flowers that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously created scents that conveyed complex emotional concepts. Our intelligence sources suggest that they have increased their surveillance activities by several orders of magnitude. Princess Lyraliai replied, her consciousness sharing images of strange artifacts that had been discovered near populated worlds throughout the galaxy. They appear to be desperately trying to understand what we are doing and why. Good. Let them waste their energy trying to analyze the unanalyzable. Marcus reached out to touch a flower that appeared to exist in 7 dimensions simultaneously, and felt his consciousness briefly merge with what seemed to be a sentient mathematical concept. His human brain interpreted the experience as something like synesthetic music that tasted purple and smelled like the square root of happiness. Marcus, Princess Laurelii, said suddenly, her mental voice carrying undertones of urgency, "We're receiving a priority communication from the deep space monitoring stations." The garden around them shifted and rearranged itself, forming a natural amphitheater with a holographic display in the center. The display showed the outer edge of the galaxy, where massive structures were emerging from what had previously appeared to be empty space. The architect fleet was revealed in all its impossible glory. Ships that were clearly buildings, stations that might have been cities, and structures so large that they warped space-time around themselves simply by existing. The fleet stretched across light years of space, a testament to technological capabilities that made current galactic civilization look like children playing with toys. Well, Marcus said, watching the display with a mixture of awe and determination, "I guess they got tired of trying to figure us out from a distance." Fleet composition analysis indicates approximately 12,000 major vessels, came a report from the monitoring stations, with technological signatures that do not match any known paradigms. Estimated time of arrival at core galactic systems, 6 months. Marcus felt Princess Laurelii's consciousness merge with his as they both contemplated the implications of what they were seeing. The architects weren't just preparing to invade. They were preparing to reshape the entire galaxy according to their own vision of optimal efficiency and harmony. "Husband," Princess Laurelii said softly, "I believe our experiment in chaos resistance is about to face its ultimate test." Marcus looked at the advancing